I'm honored to host Kent Beck as our keynote in our conference OB.IO. Many things that Kent Beck invented and pioneered, technology and concept we are using on a daily basis. If it's design pattern, TDD, refactoring, JUnit, extreme programming, Agile Manifesto, and did I forget anything? Goat farming, right? Yeah,
that has a daily impact.
Okay, that has a daily impact. So as Ori said in our morning session a decade ago, Kent, your talk inspired us as a company to move for continuous delivery. And we are very happy to hear your talk today on the 3X. So the stage is yours and we are all welcoming you.
Oh, thank you very much. The first thing that I have to do is Amit, I need to make sure that you know that you're not the only one with guitars. So just in a kind of, let's establish our relative positions here. I'm a keen guitarist. Jonathan, thank you so much for inviting me and all of you at Outbrains. I appreciate the chance to talk to you in these weird times. It is a little strange having no feedback. If you were here, you would see me staring at a black dot on my iPad, which is not my preferred means of interaction. So here's hoping someday I can come to you in Tel Aviv and we can see each other in person. But for now, this is what we have. So this is what we'll go with. I wanted to talk about a mystery that I went to Facebook to solve. And there'll be some time for questions. If you want to go into the whole Facebook destroys democracy thing, we can talk about that later. But what I want to talk about right now is when I interviewed at Facebook in late 2010, joined January 2011. And the mystery was, I went and interviewed at this place. At that point, I had written books and books about the right way to do software engineering. And they were doing none of it. Now, I don't mind if people don't follow the advice in my books. I would just like them to fail. And here was an organization that was doing really well at an interesting combination of things. So number one, so this is 2011, 600 million monthly active users. There were very few web properties of that size at the time. And the first thing is that production was very stable. Relative to, this was the fail whale at Twitter, other people weren't doing well at just stable production. And the Facebook engineering organization somehow was able to do so with an extremely lean organization. So at that point, it was still more than 1 million users per engineer. So that's the first thing. And I thought, okay, well, that's cool. I'd like to learn about operating at that scale. There aren't very many places where you can go to that school. So the second thing, though, is it was still a period of rapid growth. So month over month, I don't remember numbers, but tens of % of growth per month. So some people are able to maintain operations of a relatively fixed size, but having stable operations and rapid growth at the same time, that's a tricky balance to maintain. But that wasn't all that Facebook was doing. Facebook was introducing innovation at a rapid rate. Now, at some point, you get into some trade-off space, or it seemed to me like you would. There's some trade-off space where if you want innovation to go up, stability is just going to go down. And if you want stability to go up, then scaling has to go down. And you certainly can't have all three at the same time. So how is this organization that doesn't follow the rules no deadlines, no technical collaboration as I would understand it, very little unit testing, very little coordinated planning. None of the trappings of software engineering are there, and yet it's able to achieve this trifecta of stability, scale, and innovation at the same time. How in the world does that happen? So I showed up in January and I thought, all right, now these kids, I'm at that age where I can say kids a lot. These kids, the adults is here. I'll sort things out. I'd been there a week, and we had a hackathon. And at that point, hackathons were really important. At this point, it's empty show, but at that point, hackathons were genuinely important as a social bonding experience and as engines of innovation. And I'll explain more about how I think about this in just a sec. And one of the aspects of hackathons is that people would give classes. So I thought, okay, I'm here. Now, you know, underneath, I'm feeling fairly uncertain, right? So to compensate for that, I kind of puffed up a little bit. All right, I will give a course on test-driven development, because after all, who wouldn't want a course on test-driven development from me? So I signed up. Here's my course, and the course just above mine was Advanced Excel Techniques, and the course just below mine on the sign-up sheet was Argentinian Tango. I thought this will be good. This will be my introduction to the engineering organization. They can see what they've got here, and everything will be fine. Well, when the time came to give the courses, I looked at the sign-up sheets. And the Excel sheet, the Excel course was completely full and had a waiting list. And the Argentinian Tango course was completely full and had a waiting list. And I had 0 attendees for my course. And I thought, uh-oh, what am I gonna do? How can I have any impact here if nobody's gonna listen to me? And I had a crisis. Like, yeah, here's the job. I need the job. The last of my kids are, not the last, the middle cohort of my kids are going into college. I got to pay for it somehow. Like, how am I going to do this? So I took the most frightening decision of my career. Now, some people will talk to me, oh, how do you have such courage with these crazy ideas? And it's not courage. The crazy ideas all just seem obvious to me, and they just aren't obvious to anyone else yet. But this one was genuine courage. I said, you know what? I'm going to forget everything that I know about software engineering. I'm not going to TDD. I'm not going to refactor. I'm not going to, none of that stuff. I'm going to see how fast I can learn this special style of software engineering that's going on here, because Facebook had a style. They knew what they were doing. It was just weird. I'm going to learn how fast I can learn this style, and I'm going to see if I don't get fired at the end of 6 months. Because the thing where I carry all of my baggage and all of my history and say, okay, now Papa's here, here's how you do this, that is just clearly not going to work for me. Nobody's going to listen to me. I'm going to fizzle out, and I'm out of here. So I just started coding, and I would look at what the person to my left did and look at what the person to my right did. And I'd say, okay, monkey see, monkey do. So I think this should be a bunch of separate pull requests. No, this is one. Okay. And I'd say, oh, I need some tests for this. No, I don't need tests for that. Oh, okay. Like here's a safe change. Oh, I have to have a feature flag for this so I can turn it off once it's in production. Oh, okay. And every day was school day. Every day I learned something new about development. And it was a surprise. And I'm a first principles person. I love to know what the principles are, and then I want to derive my behavior from the principles. I didn't know what the principles were. All I could do was see the behavior to either side of me, try and copy, even though it felt bad. One of the things about change is the first stage of change is doing things that feel bad, even though you suspect that you're right. So I just gave it a try. And 7 years and however many 380 weekly one-on-ones with some manager or other, I hadn't been fired yet. And then that 782nd one, I got fired. But that's a story for another day. So here's this mystery. And man, I love a good mystery like this. I will dig in for years. This is another aspect of my personality is sometimes success is just outworking the other person. So it took me 5 years to figure out this trio of stability, scaling, and innovation. And by the time I figured it out, Facebook was about done with it. But there were powerful lessons in there for me, and that's the big center of what I want to talk with you about today. So, as I said, it took me 5 years, and when the idea hit me, it was a combination of factors. And this is another general lesson for me in thinking is that when new things happen, it's always a combination. It's never one thing right out of the blue. It's always there's some combination of ideas that come together. George Balanchine, the choreographer, said, there are no new steps, there are just new combinations. And the same is true in the world of ideas that we work in. It's kind of early here, so the coffee's going to come out a little bit. So one set of ideas that came in was about midway through my time at Facebook. I saw people, smart people, starting to call for something that looked very much like waterfall development. And so there would be some internal memo and say, here's how you develop new products. You first go and thoroughly analyze the market space. Then you bring in the designers to come up with the product to address the needs of the market space that you've uncovered. Then you implement that, and then you have a big launch, and you have a successful product, and everybody's really happy. Now that's just the waterfall, except the programmers don't do the testing, the users do the testing. And I thought, well, this can't work for all these reasons that this never worked. The other irony was that no successful product launch at Facebook ever happened that way. This was entirely, there's a beautiful paper by David Parnass called A Rational Design Method and How and Why to Fake It. And that follows the same schema. You can look at a successful launch and you can tell a story about it that looks very linear and very rational, and everybody made good decisions at every stage. That's just not how things happen in reality. Anyway, so there's this call for waterfall, the return of the waterfall, but and the 35-year-old Kent would have gone, oh, these people are morons. So the difference is the 50-year-old Kent goes, huh, I know this is not an effective way to do development, but these aren't stupid people. So how are they thinking that's different than how I'm thinking? Not completely grown up, but growing up a little bit. So that was thread number one. Thread number two was I had listened to a podcast sometime before. At that moment, I was living on a goat farm, an 8-hectare goat farm in rural Southern Oregon, out in the middle of nothing. And when you farm goats, you have a lot of time to think and to listen to podcasts while you're milking. My forearms were just like Popeye forearms. And I'd listened to a podcast quite a while before with Nicholas Nassim Taleb, who is an interesting thinker and somebody I find it hard to listen to, but there's some ideas in there. And Taleb had made the distinction between here, and I'll start with the whiteboard, between two kinds of payoffs. He said, if we take the payoffs from an investment and we sort them, there are some kind of investments where you make a small investment and most of the time you lose everything, and every once in a while you have a big, big hit. And these are called convex payoffs. Now, I'm a terrible spatial reasoner. I can, if I'm trying to figure out which direction to screw something, I can think about it really hard and go, it has to go this way. And then I can say, no, 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 think about it really hard and say, no, no, it has to go this way. No, 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 think about it and this. And then whatever I do is going to be the wrong thing. So I couldn't understand why this curve was called convex. And it turns out it's because if a little person stands right here and they look this direction, the curve is convex to them. That took me 6 years to figure out. So that's me being persistent. Okay, so if you're in a convex world, what you want to do is, if you can move the cost of the investment down a little bit, then you can make more investments. The peak of this top payout will be much higher and the area under the curve will be much larger. So in a convex world, you can't guess what's going to succeed. You can only try things. And the cheaper you can make it to try things, the more money you make. That's how you maximize value. Contrast that with a concave payout. These are payouts where the investment is relatively large. Most of the time, you make a small payoff, and every once in a while, you lose everything. So this is concave because, again, a little person standing right here looking this direction, this curve looks concave to them. So in a concave world, you should behave very differently. In a concave world, not ending up down here is really, really valuable. So this is things like commercial banking. In commercial banking, you make a loan, you take deposits, you pay an interest rate, you make a loan, you charge an interest rate that's higher, you make a little bit off of each loan, and you have lots and lots of loans. If there is a financial collapse, then that costs you a lot of money. So you'd like to avoid getting down here. And if you can make this payoff a little bit higher, then the area under the curve, the positive area under the curve, becomes much larger. So in a concave world, your behavior is completely different than in a convex world. You want to carefully think about each investment that you make, because one, it's going to be expensive, so you can't make too many of them, and two, you want to avoid the downside of the investment. Okay, so I've got these two ideas rattling around in my head. I have the return of the waterfall, WTF, and I have this distinction between convex and concave, which I finally figured out where the little person stands, so those work out. And one day it hit me that the waterfall thinking, that let's plan this product out to every last detail, that kind of thinking lives in a concave world. And the kind of behavior that I had seen at Facebook that was very successful at innovation lived in a convex world. You have lots of people running around trying seemingly random stuff, and every once in a while one of those pays off really big. So for example, I accidentally saved $5 million a year in boot camp. So my first 2 weeks at Facebook, I paid for my entire tenure there. I was just looking at some code, complicated, messy code, and I thought, man, there seems to be something wrong here. So I printed it all out. I put it down on the floor. It was like 20 feet long. I got markers, got down on my knees, and I drew the data dependencies in this complicated code. And I realized, oh, this can be made more efficient and get the same answers. So I submitted the change, and a week later, my manager came to me and said, operations said that all of a sudden the machines that are running photos, which at that time, the machines that are running photos suddenly had their load drop, and they traced it back to this change that you submitted. I said, oh, am I in trouble? He said, no. We're going to be able to decommission enough machines to save $5 million a year. Well, if you're in an environment where it's easy to randomly stumble across huge savings, you should just be trying all kinds of stuff. Okay, so that's the sort of world that Facebook was in. So these two ideas came together. I realized, people are thinking as if they're in a concave world when they're actually in convex world. And this is new to Facebook. Facebook has been relatively immune to this mistake and instead behaved a very different way. And here's the different way that Facebook behaved. I'm going to a different color just because celebration. All right, here we go. So here's how this model works. You try out, let's say we're looking for some new product, new idea, whatever it is. You try out an idea. Usually think it might work, and it doesn't work, but that's okay. You try out another idea. That one seemed prominent. No, that didn't work out. You try out another idea. Still nothing. Now you're getting a little frustrated. You try out another idea, and that doesn't seem to work. And now you're and so you try out something else. And then you think, now I've got it. This is the idea. Nope, that one didn't work either. And then you try out another idea, just because, like, who knows, we're drinking beers and we're trying things out. And that last idea takes off 10 times as strong as the other ideas. It didn't look like it at first, didn't look any different at first than anything else that we've done, but the reaction to it is completely different. So for me, this is my Twitter feed is where I practice this. I have lots of ideas in my head. Of all the things going around in my head, what are people interested in listening to? Well, I can't guess. So I get on Twitter, and if I have an idea that seems like a tweet and is neither a felony nor patently offensive in some way, I'm just going to put it out there. Because I don't know, at the point I press tweet, I have no idea what the reaction is going to be to what I'm about to say. And the difference between an ordinary tweet for me and one that goes viral, that blows up, is at least 10 to 1 in terms of engagement. But at the moment I press tweet, my feelings at that moment are completely irrelevant to which bucket this one's going to fall into. And for me, that's one of the lessons. You know, I want to succeed. And in this explore game, you can't succeed. You can only try things and pay attention. If you try long enough, something will succeed much better than the other things that you've thought about. And this is because of the dynamics of power law distributions, which I won't be able to get into today, but that's where this gets really fun. You can't guess, so you got to try stuff. And if things fail, that is, blow up the way you hoped it would, is just move on to the next one. And that can be difficult because you can have long strings of failures. The only failure in exploration is failure to learn. Now, you can also spend too much time because as humans, sunk cost fallacy grabs a hold of our brains and twists them up. You definitely want to avoid that. But you need to, in the exploration mode, you need to just try stuff out. Now, once one of these has blown up and starts to get some momentum, the game changes. And this is the key insight to what I'm talking about. When you go from explore, and you'll see now we're scaling this idea, except, oh, this is a problem. We didn't know that was going to be a problem. We fix it, but we don't have time to fix it properly because the next existential crisis, well, now we're running out of disk space. Oh no, what are we going to do about that? And now we can't hire salespeople fast enough. And what do we do about that? And then as we expand, this is a little like the story of the 7 labors of Hercules. Hercules needs to complete all 7 impossible tasks in order to misogynistically get the princess. If he fails at any of them, then there's no payoff. And this game, the expand game, is very much like that. This is one damn thing after another. It's fortunately a brief period, the vertical growth phase. It's very intense. This is the only part of the curve where extra hours makes an actual difference. In the explore phase, you need a rested, prepared mind to be ready to receive insight. In the last phase, where you finish the growth, and we'll get to that in a second, you need to work sustainably. But while you're expanding, yeah, this can be pretty intense. Putting in effort, extra effort can make a difference. So that's the second part of the curve, is this expand phase. And then at some point, that crazy vertical growth starts to become predictable. You say, oh, I see, for every 1 million customers, we need to add a new data center and blah, 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 blah. And you set up the pipelines and you set up the procedures. And now you still have a lot of growing to do as you finish out this curve. And here's where you pull value out of this process. But the extract game is very different than the expand game. In the expand game, you get everybody together and you're, having rah-rah meetings every morning so that you survive until the end of the day. In the extract game now, you have a big organization and you have a functional reporting chain as well as a project reporting chain. Explorers are little tiny. Expands go from 5 to 20. The extracts go from 20 to hundreds or thousands. So each of these sections of the curve, this was the insight, each of these sections of the curve is a completely different set of trade-offs. Optimal behavior is completely different. And yet most organizations focus on extract behavior. They've gone through this logistic curve once. They finally get to extract. Now we're making money and we're going to survive. Let's run everything that we do this way. But extract projects, and this is exactly the convex part of the curve and the concave part of the curve. Extract projects are large and you want to carefully plan them out, but explore projects should still be small. So you need a different style of funding. Explore projects should get little bits of money. Hey, we need to go for 2 weeks to try the thing. Okay, go try the thing and come back and tell me what you learn. Most of the time you learn that the thing is not a good idea. Okay, that's fine. Extract projects, if you were going to replace the messaging infrastructure with the other messaging infrastructure, and it's going to take us 18 months and cost us $100 million. Yeah, let's think about that project to a much greater degree. So the trade-offs change completely. And what Facebook was really good at doing was managing different projects in different phases differently across the portfolio of everything that they worked on. I'll take a specific example, KPIs. KPIs make great sense in extract because you know what to measure, you know what the inputs and the outputs, the connection is. You know, if you pull this lever, that this dial is going to change. So KPIs make good sense. KPIs make no sense as goals in Explore. Qualitative, yes, but quantitative, you don't know what's going to happen, but you know what you're going to pay attention to. I talked with a manager of experimental ads products at Facebook once, and he said, either, Facebook is very KPI oriented, either we achieve 0% of our goal or 1,000 times what our goal was. It's one of the two, and when we execute the project, we don't know which it's going to be. So you can't say, are KPIs a best practice? Well, depends on where you are in the curve. In Expand, typically it's a KPI singular. There's one bottleneck to growth that's going to kill you if you don't address it. So even something like management style changes dramatically between the phases. So this model is called 3X. I got a little carried away talking about it. I can talk about this for hours and hours. I use it all the time in my daily life. If I'm thinking about what music to produce, if I'm thinking about art to create, or stories to write, or ideas, or just all kinds of things, first question I want to know is, am I exploring, expanding, or extracting? Now, there's so much more I would like to talk about, but I have a point that I would like to get to before I do that. Well, instead of doing that. So anyway, that's thing one, 3X. Think about where you are in that curve. Here's a topic that's come up quite recently for me. I work now for a company called Gusto in my day job. Rapidly growing, serves small businesses, which is a really interesting and suddenly exciting business to be in these times. And when I arrived, there was a lot of focus on how hard people were working. And I thought, but we're not getting the business value that we need to get as we scale up. Yes, maybe this way of working was fine when it was 50 engineers or 20 engineers, but this isn't working at 200. And my colleague Nimrod Hufian and I came to an idea that of why this was so. There was a whole lot in the chain of value. We can divide. I'm making this up as I go. Here's us. Here's our customer. We put in some effort on our side. Now, effort is easy to measure. It's easy to notice how much time, money, whatever resources we're expending. But the customer doesn't care how hard we're working. This effort turns into output. Now, this is closer, output like features. This is closer to what the customer cares about. Might be the sales organization says, hey, I need feature X in order to compete. The sales organization doesn't care how hard we worked on it. They just want to have some feature. It's tempting then to measure output and think, okay, now we know how we're doing. But none of what the effort that we put in, the output we create, none of it matters until there's some behavior change on the part of the customer. And this is where we talk about measuring outcome over output. And measuring outcome is harder. It's not sitting right in our building, but it's much more what matters to the outside world. The loop isn't finished though. The customer gets some outcome, realizes more value. That was the 5 a.m. talking right there. Realizes some more value from what we're offering them, and that turns into some sort of impact on the company. Better revenues, increased referrals, a shorter, cheaper sales cycle. And impact is easier for us to measure than outcome. So when I come into a situation, somebody says, okay, here's how things are going. This is the schema in my mind. If somebody explains how many hours they're working or how many engineers and designers and product people and testers are on some project and they're proud of it, I think, okay, now we have an opportunity for improvement. I've learned to say that instead of a mess. If they're telling me about what features they've created, I think, oof, it's a little bit better. If they can tell me the effect of the changes that they make on customer behavior, now we have something that we can really work with. And this connects with 3X. You're going to have some of your effort is going to go into exploration. Some of those things are going to work out better than others. You give them to the customer, and you don't really have feedback until the customer you can observe customer behavior. So in exploration, your goal is to go from effort to a measured outcome as quickly as possible. And you won't see impact from explorations for some time, but that's fine because you're going to place a whole bunch of bets. One of those bets is going to have more outcome than anything else. And that's the one that you want to put in the extra effort to turn that into impact, because that one's going to make a real difference for you. And this schema has really helped me to orient myself when I'm in discussions with people about why is development so ineffective? Well, first, what are you measuring? And if you're not measuring outcomes, then how can you measure outcomes? Because until you can measure outcomes, you can't optimize the process. Once you can measure outcomes, then you can start executing on 3X. begin explorations, notice from the outcomes when the time has come to shift to expand mode. Once expand mode plays out, then you can go into extract mode and start realizing the impact of all this good work that you're doing. So there you go. That's two of my most recent ideas. And now, Jonathan, I think we've got some time for questions. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have some questions submitted. I think one thing is we understand that in the three phases, we need to act differently. If you can, for example, give some example of what do we need to do differently, and one of the questions was regarding quality. I can assure it was not my question. Someone did ask that. So quality, how do you treat it differently in the three phases?
Sure. So going back to the difference between convex and concave payouts. In a convex world, you have very little to lose. So working really hard not to lose a very small amount, it doesn't make any sense. If I'm in a convex world, I'm developing in a convex world, I want an answer to my question. Is this one of these winner ideas as quickly as possible? So I'm not going to spend any more time on testing. I'm not going to spend any more time on refactoring. Anything that has a long time to pay out, if it means that the answer comes back later. Now, sometimes you'll be exploring and writing tests is the quickest way to finish your exploration. But much more in those early phases, testing, refactoring, forget about it. That was a shock to me at Facebook. Like, why aren't people writing tests? You have to write tests. No, you don't, if the code's going to be deleted by 5 p.m. That trade-off in expand, you don't have time to do thorough testing, but you should do regression testing. So you have a bug and you want to make sure that that bug doesn't happen again. And as you're fixing it and writing tests for it, you look around and you say, wow, there's 1,000 other tests I would like to write, but I have another crisis. Then you get into extract, the game changes completely. In extract, if you're not writing tests, you're making a big mistake because this code is going to last for a long time. Customers and the impact coming back to us depends on this code working. So you absolutely should be refactoring. You absolutely should be testing. You absolutely should be estimating in extract. So the game changes completely. The rules of the game change, so your behavior should change. It's like the difference between football, real football, American football, and rugby. If the rules of the game change and your strategy doesn't change and your players don't change, you're going to have a really bad day. And that's what 3X, that kind of looks like software development in all phases, but in fact, the rules of the game are different. You need to adapt. Does that answer the question?
Yes, sure. Another question, what's predicate help you to decide in which phase you are in?
If you don't know where value is going to come from, you're exploring. You can fool yourself and think, well, I know this idea is going to succeed. Yeah, prove it, and prove it as cheaply as possible. There's a beautiful lecture by John Carmack that I hosted while we were both at Facebook that talks about this in more detail. And I can dig up the link and I'll send it to you later and you can distribute it. If you don't know where value is coming from, then you're exploring and you should do it as cheaply as possible. If people are yelling at you because your product sucks so badly and you just wrote it, then you're expanding. That's you have to take complaints as a positive sign. People say, oh, your product is so stupid because if only you did X, you'd really be, I would really like to use it. Fantastic. That's a thing that you should do. It's not necessarily the next thing you should do, but it means that people care and you need to move into expand mode. Find the one bottleneck to growth, address it, go to the next one. The expand to extract transition is more of a choice. So you look at some place like Uber, and because capital was cheap, they put off the transition to profitability in order to try to achieve a much bigger payout when they got there. Lots of startups now are going through a forced transition from expand to extract. If you can't just have a VC write a bigger check, then profitability matters all of a sudden, and that's the transition from expand to extract. Expand is growth at all costs, and extract is sustainability and ROI. And people are being forced to do it. Some are doing it more successfully than others, but that transition is more of a choice. Then you get into extract, and as soon as you get there, you should be putting small bets on the next set of explorations and being prepared to treat those projects completely differently than you treat the extract project. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. Another question, we are hosting here, or we invited also the HR team, or we should call them people and culture. Yeah. And one of the questions that I think also will be relevant for them, are there different types of people that fits to the different phases? So do you see like explorer, expander, extractors, and how that also impacts the organization structure? So
I can answer the first question quickly, and the second question, I have opinions on, but it would take more time than we have. Yes, there are absolutely different kinds of people. There are people who just love. So here's 3x4s. There's people who just love this phase down here, and they want to try something out. And they would stick a pencil in their eye rather than live up here and extract. They want things to be different every day. I'm a natural explorer. I like trying crazy stuff. I love it when nobody knows what the hell I'm doing. Why are you doing this? You'll see, by which I mean we'll see. And I know I'm kind of emotionally done with a project the first time somebody says, oh, can't this seem like a crazy idea, but I think it's going to work. I'm like, oh, now I have to go find another project, because that's where I live. Now, I do need to push the idea far enough up to hand it off to somebody who just loves expansion. And the expanders are the people who like living in chaos. They're typically technically very proficient at what they're doing, and they enjoy the adrenaline surge of solving completely unprecedented problems. They'll take an idea, move it a ways up, and then eventually the scaling problems start to be conventional and boring, and they peel off and find the next problem to get handed off to, and they move up. And so they're just operating in here. Whereas the explorer was here and then back and here and then back and here and then back. Similarly, there are people who love coming in on Monday and knowing what they're going to do all week and knowing what impact they're going to have by Friday. And those people need to be able to find projects late in expansion and pick them up and move them to extraction. And then when it gets too big or boring, then maybe they move on to the next thing. But you can spend years, you can spend an entire career in extraction for a single product. So the short answer to what the org structure is it needs to minimize the friction of moving between projects, which seems inefficient. You want the people who know the most about the system to work on the system. And that's not true if you're working the 3X dynamic. In the 3X dynamic, you want people working in the phase that brings them joy, that gives them energy, that fires them up, and then you need some way for these handoffs to take place. The Facebook answer to that was to give engineers complete autonomy. You go to your manager and you say, yeah, I'm going to go work on this thing for 2 months. And it was your manager's job to take whatever important thing you were doing that you were dropping on the floor and find some other person to work on that. And that it's a really hard style of management and seems, again, inefficient. But if you want the value from the entire curve, I don't know of any better way to do it. That's the very short answer. And I can talk for hours and hours about the details of org structure and culture that supports 3X kind of behavior.
Yeah, and we can hear for more hours, I think, on this kind of content, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I really want to thank you for joining us in our conference. And thank you for that talk.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much.